Greetings to everyone for joining us in this wonderful session. We're going to talk today about Marc Brackett's book, Dealing with Feeling. I'm proud to say that I'm already part of this book because I blurbed it in its early stages. I'm actually going to read my blurb, and just so you get a sense of how I felt about reading this book. And then what we're going to do is Marc is going to talk to us for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then the two of us are going to get back in together, and we're actually in the same room at this particular moment. And I'm going to slide across his shoulder at some stage. There he is. we're ready to do it. You did. You beat me to it. So Marc Brackett's powerful and kaleidoscopic book, Dealing with Feeling, declares with grace and wit, a lot of wit, and style, and a lot of style, that emotional regulation is the single most important skill that we can develop in today's world. We live in shattered times, and Marc Brackett wants to help us put the mosaic back together. Some of you know that I'm fond of saying that in this broken world, we seek for repair. I truly believe that Marc is one of those people who is helping us, guiding us towards a sense of repair, that being interior repair and exterior repair, because so much of what happens within ourselves then happens outside. I'm reminded of Rumi's poetic line that yesterday I was clever and I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise and I wanted to change myself. I've had the pleasure of talking with Marc on a couple of occasions, including very recently in Connecticut at the Cape Theatre, where he wowed a big crowd. And it's wonderful to see that this book is already having an influence and getting out there. Of course, it's not his first book, because many of you will know his first book, Permission to Feel. You will also know him from his work in the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and all the other work that he does. But we are very, very happy, because one of the other reasons that we're here together again today is that Marc has joined the Narrative 4 board, and he is going to be president he is president of the Narrative 4 board, which is wonderful news for us. We look forward to a long and fruitful relationship together. So I'm delighted to welcome you all. I'm really grateful for so many people signing up and showing such interest. And please spread the word. We're delighted that Narrative 4 was able to present you this today. And without further ado, Dr. Marc Brackett.
I'm waiting for
the applause.
All right. I think that, isn't that the Gaga song? I live for the applause. I live for the snaps. Anyhow, great to be here with everyone. Thank you, Narrative 4 team, for putting all this together. Thank you to everyone who is here for joining. And I believe that the chat is open. Am I right? Excellent. I'm presenting to all of you, and my hunch is that we got people from all over the place. Can everyone just say hi in the chat, since you can't say hi to me in person? So thank you again, and we're going to jump right in. I'm going to ask you to take a minute, because each of our as you know from Colum's introduction, my day job is I'm a professor at Yale, and I run the Center for Emotional Intelligence. We're kind of known for the work we do in SEL. Our approach is Ruler, which is in about 5,000 schools, and really happy to be collaborating and thinking through all this work in the broader field with Narrative 4. And I think we have collective goals. We want children and youth to grow up to live certain kinds of lives. And so my question to all of you is, take a moment and imagine the children that you serve. If you're working for Narrative 4, if you're a teacher, a parent, whatever your role is in life, you know who kids are, whether you're an aunt, an uncle, or just your neighbor's kid. And imagine them being 25 years old. What would be your hope and dream for them? So when the kids of today's world are in their 20s or 30s, my hope is they can, or they are. What is that? And I want you to put that in the chat, please. Just whatever comes to mind. Don't edit yourself. What do you hope that the children of today are for tomorrow? To be content and do their best. Thank you. To believe, to live in peace, to make their own decisions, to be happy, to feel like they belong, to know how to communicate. They can rely on themselves and have a support system at the same time. They're kind. They believe in each other. They listen. I'm going to break into a Beyonce song, but I decided not to. So take a moment now and ask yourself, I mean, when you visualize the happy, healthy, kind, relationship-oriented, centered kids who are living in a democratic society, they feel heard, they feel seen, they care about our common humanity. How many, all right, let's see what this in percentages. From 0 to 100%, 0 being not at all, to 100% being 100% of the time, how much do you believe our education system provides children with the attributes, knowledge, and skills to lead to those outcomes? What do you think? Wherever you live, what 0%, 50%, 100%? So we got 30, less than 5%, 25%, somebody that's 70%. You're definitely not from the United States. Maybe you are. I mean, think about what we need to learn and be able to do to be healthy, to be happy, to have purpose and meaning in life, to have good relationships. And all the things that you said are what my research shows. The top things that people are caring about are happiness and well-being, persistence and resilience, purposeful work, kindness and compassion, meaningful and healthy relationships, being socially responsible, and financial security, which comes last, by the way. And my belief system is that if we are trying to cultivate children who have these life outcomes, that we have to probably do something a little bit different in the way we raise them and teach them. How many of you would agree with that, at least, that we should probably shift some things in the way we raise and teach kids if we want these things to be the outcomes for them in their 20s and 30s? Yes? No? What do you think? I got one thumbs up. 100% agree. Yep, absolutely. Great. So with that said, we're going to just jump into the basics of my work. And the topic of this webinar is dealing with feeling, and deep gratitude for the team at Narrative 4 for supporting the launch of my new book, which is also called Dealing with Feeling, as Colum mentioned. And I think at the heart of it is being self-aware. Many of you may know this tool that we developed at the center called the Mood Meter. I'm not going to teach it today. You can read more about it elsewhere. But the basics are that we have emotions in each of these 4 quadrants. Yellow are the happy, excited emotions. Green are the calm, content emotions. Blue is the down, disappointment, sadness, and the red is the anger and anxiety family. Now, I could ask you how you're feeling about life, which I'm curious about, but I'm not sure I can manage that. I'm really curious to know how you're feeling about being with us today. You got Colum and me and the team at Narrative 4. We're going to talk about feelings and regulating them. So if I were to ask you to take this context into consideration, how are you feeling? Let's put some words in the chat. What are the words that come to mind for you? Inspired to learn, hopeful, content, hopeful, grateful, relieved, stimulated, curious, excited, tired, curious, excited. Awesome. So you're in a pretty good place, at least for this hour with me. Now, that's, those are great places to be. We're not going to be there all day long, every day. But how many of you will drift or shift at some point during this webinar? Anyone? How many of you get distracted or get slightly tired or maybe feel like, Mark, you got to go faster or whatever it might be? Anybody going to have that issue? Yeah. So yes, definitely. I've already lost my thoughts. You're having a hard time already. Someone's blaming me. They're like, as long as you engage us, I'll be fine. Okay. Work emails are popping up. So I bring that up because this is what regulation, counting on me, Mark. Thank you. I can do my job, but you got to do your part too. But you are bringing up something very interesting that we talk a lot about, like self-control, but we don't talk a lot about co-regulation, meaning it is partly my responsibility as your presenter right now to keep you emotionally engaged, because I could be like one of my colleagues at the university I'm going to introduce you to some things about emotional intelligence today. You might be interested, you might not be. I don't really care. I'm just going to tell you what I know, and you'll take what you want to take, and you don't take it, you don't take it. And then all of a sudden your brains are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it. So point is that yes, you need strategies to deal with your own feelings. And yes, I, as your presenter, need strategies to help bring you through a process. Does that resonate with you? That in classrooms, in families, in schools, it's both self-regulation and co-regulation. And again, I ask you, how much do we learn about this stuff growing up? Not too much. Colum mentioned my first book, Permission to Feel. If you want the cheat sheet for emotional literacy, you can go there. This is just that cheat sheet for feeling words. Lots of different words to describe our feelings, maybe 2,000. That's just 100. But I thought you'd want to know from our research kind of how people are feeling these days in our work, both my work and the specific work of Narrative 4 is in education. And so we're thinking a lot about how teachers are feeling, how students are feeling. And we see here, there's a lot of strong, unpleasant feelings. Same thing for students, a lot of strong, kind of difficult feelings. And the question I've had for my career is, what do we do about it? How much can we change the system? How much can we change the individual? How much can we change our relationships? And for the first 25 years of my career, I ran around the world teaching people the skills of emotional intelligence, which I still do, by the way. But what I found was there was a lot of resistance. I'd meet people like Colum, and he'd say things like, really? Really? Emotions matter? Like Lisa, right? Same thing, like empathy, compassion, like Mark. Really? Who really cares? Just kidding. Like freaking out right now. Like, he's fired. I'm like, I haven't even got hired yet. Anyhow, but there are a lot of people who have this belief system. I've been in schools where educators have said things to me like, my job is not to talk about feelings. Or CEOs of big companies, and they say things like, look at my office, look at my income. Do I really need to worry about how I feel or how other people feel? And the answer is yes, you do. And the reason why is that emotions matter for everything. Everything. Attention, memory and learning, decision-making, relationships, physical, mental health, and performance. All right, let's do a little bit of a self-awareness check. Has anyone here in the last month had a feeling that made them have difficulty focusing? Yes or no in the chat? All right, everybody. Has anyone here had a feeling that maybe, and they were so activated by someone in their family or at work or anywhere where you felt a strong emotion and you might have said something, done something that wasn't the best? Okay. Has anyone here ever worked with someone who was emotionally dysregulated? Okay. Has anyone ever had a feeling that got so strong that it felt like your physical health or your mental health was being sacrificed? Has anyone here ever had a strong feeling like anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, overwhelm that got in the way of you achieving a goal? All right, so it looks like we got yeses coming out of everyone's mouth or fingertips. And so I just make that point because it's so important for us to have clarity that how we feel and what we do with our feelings influences everything from how we learn to the choices we make, to the quality of our relationships, to our physical mental health, and to our performance. And with that said, given all the resistance I had in my career, I've always asserted that it has to start somewhere. And I now believe, and my research supports this, that we need to start with people's mindsets. And I call the first mindset about emotional intelligence permission to feel. Some of you know me a little bit, most of you may not. Just a quick little kind of background. So I'm 56 as of 3 weeks ago, although I was just interviewed and someone called me boyish, which made me feel very happy. A little weird, but putting that aside. I grew up in northern New Jersey, about 30 minutes right from where I'm sitting right now, a little town called Clifton, New Jersey. And two parents who loved me a lot. I would say neither one of them went to the school of emotional intelligence, however. My mother had a lot of anxiety. My father had a lot of anger, didn't really regulate it very well. I had two brothers. Both were out of the home by the time I was 6. And unfortunately, that was the time when a predator came into my life and sadly abused me for about 4 or 5 years of my life. And I never shared it with anyone because for whatever reason, didn't feel safe to share, was threatened not to share. The list goes on in terms of what might have prevented me from being my true self with my own parents and brothers. And then one day, a man came into my life who happened to be my mother's brother, who was a sixth grade teacher by day and a band leader, trumpet player by night, who was writing a curriculum to teach kids about feelings. That was my mom's brother, Uncle Marvin. And the long story short is that he just totally changed the conditions of my life because he asked me that simple yet profound question: how are you feeling? And he didn't say, toughen up, kiddo, or I'm going to have a nervous breakdown if you tell me anything that's not, easy to hear. He just listened, and he was there for me. And I share that with you because what I found in my research is that of all the strategies that we could learn to regulate our feelings, this one actually matters the most. That we feel as if we have people around us who create the conditions for us to be our true selves. Now, you might wonder how many of us have those kinds of people. Well, my research shows only about 35% of us believe when we're younger that we have someone like this in our lives. In the workplace as adults, about 40 to 50% of us say yes, but still over half of us don't feel that we're in a relationship or have relationships with people that create these conditions. Now, you might wonder what the characteristics are of these Uncle Marvins or Aunt Lisas or Papa Colums. And here they are. So just take a moment and look at those. Non-judgmental, empathetic or empathic, good listeners. Just think about that again. Non-judgmental people who are good listeners and show empathy and compassion. Notice what's not on there. Nobody says, brilliant, whippersnapper, wise. No, they're all social and emotional attributes. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we move forward, because what I find also in my research is that the number one barrier to, let me ask you that question. What do you think prevents the adults who are raising and teaching kids from being Uncle Marvins? No modeling, fear, judgment, lack of examples, their own judgment, fear, insecurity, your own past history, lack of self-awareness. Really good points. Many or most of which are completely valid. The two big ones in my research are time. I don't have time to be an Uncle Marvin. And I always think, you don't have time to be non-judgmental. To be honest with you, it's metabolically more costly to be judgmental. You got to work hard to be judgmental. To let someone be their true selves is actually quite easy. Fear is the other big one, as people have been saying, because it's like, I don't know what to say or do. But notice what's not on the word either. Let me go back. No one says fixer. No one says problem solver. I find that fascinating because we're not looking for people to solve our problems or to fix us. We're looking for presence. We're looking for people who can help us just show up and feel as if we matter. Now, you might wonder, does this predict anything about a person's life? Well, my research shows it does. You're better at dealing with feelings as an adult. You got greater mental health, greater physical health, better sleep quality, and your purpose in meaning life and life satisfaction are all significantly higher. So, kind of the master strategy is permiso para sentir. It is permission to feel. Now, let's get into the skills. So we're going to give ourselves and everyone we love, and even the people we don't love that much, everybody gets permission to feel. And then we have to think about, okay, what are the underlying skills of emotional intelligence that help us make this a reality? There's recognizing emotions, understanding, labeling, expressing emotions. And all important skills, which I've talked about for the last 6 years of my life, maybe 150 times a year. And so today we're going to focus on the last R of ruler, which is regulation. And I'm going to just share with you one funny slide. So here's a slide that reminded me the other day when I was pulling this together about 2020. We were putting Q-tips in our noses to check if we were COVID. There were people wearing some serious masks. There was, in June, the death of George Floyd and murders that were really activating us for legitimate reasons. Many of us were living in isolation. As you can see here from this photo of me, I had a nervous breakdown and was taking pictures of myself with my hairstyle and each quadrant of the mood meter. I mean, when I think back, like, Mark, that was really weird. And then you put it on Instagram, like even weirder. But yet we were all in a weird place. Am I alone there? Or did some of you do things that were like, wow, like in retrospect, a little off? Do I get a yes, or am I the only one? Somebody, I'm not alone. Thank you. Well, the one thing that was really difficult for me was that my mother-in-law got stuck with us. She came for a wedding on March 5th of 2020, a friend of mine. And then was supposed to go home March 15th. But on March 13th, all the flights to Panama got canceled. Long story, but it got really ugly to the point where she said things like, are you really the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence? And really kind of messy. And I was not the most skillful emotion scientist in terms of my relationships back then. And I said things that were not kind, and it got ugly. But then I did go to sleep, in the night that I was the worst, and thought, Mark, there's a better version of yourself just dying to come out. And where is that person? And it was that moment, literally, when I walked down the stairs the next morning, I'm like, the only way I'm going to figure out how to do better is to write a book about it. And so that was the beginning of writing my book, Dealing with Feeling. It was recognizing that here I was, someone who had all the knowledge in the world, taught these things for 25 years, and yet I could not regulate. And it drove me out of my mind. And I wanted to know, why could I not regulate when I knew so much, but couldn't do it? Has anyone ever felt that way about themselves? Like, you feel like, I've gone to all these workshops on breathing and mindfulness and self-awareness, and then someone triggers you and you're like, yeah, I'm getting a lot of hell yes. So going back to the research, what we've learned in our research is that most people learn bupkis. Most people say they learn very little at home. Most people say they learn very little at school. But now we have to get into the definition, because I'm a scientist. That's one word, actually. And I like definition. So in the chat, what do you believe emotion regulation is? Let's go. The ability to recognize and manage, stopping, empathy for self, prime. Someone has read my work. Very good. Managing how you run the world, awareness of your feelings in the moment, the ability to consciously do something, and can't read it so fast. Self-awareness, pause before acting. Really good. Well, here's what I think emotion regulation is. What do you think about that? This is, Gretchen is like, wow, acronyms. I share this with you only because, once in a while I have to make myself feel smart. And, but when I was writing my book, I felt like a formula to guide people might be helpful, or maybe not. So, man, if you're doing a formula, I'm not sure I can go there if we're talking about emotions. Remember, this is a real science. It has to be a formula. So, anyone feel like they know what the letters mean? What do you think the G and the S mean? ER is obviously emotion regulation. Emotion regulation is a set of G plus S. Give me strength, goal and success. We're getting close. Skills. It's goals and strategies. All right. Emotion regulation is a set of goals and strategies. I got to want to regulate. I want to prevent. Someone said prime. You get an A+ from my class. You're preventing an unwanted emotion. That's P. You're reducing a difficult emotion. That's R. You're initiating an emotion to be engaging. That's I. You're maintaining an emotion. That's M. Or you're enhancing an emotion. That's E. So goals, strategies. You hear about these strategies all the time. Think more positively, go for a walk, take a breath. Those are all the strategies. So it's an emotion regulation, is a set of goals and strategies that are a function of E plus P plus C. What's the E? What emotions? Tina, you're the winner. What's the P? I don't know why I'm screaming. The P is, we got performance, physical presence, practice, perception, processing, all great words, but not the word. Plan. I love this. It is, I am and you are a what? What are we each? We are people, person. The emotion plus person plus C is context, Tracy. You got it. So emotion regulation is a set of goals and strategies that are a function of the emotion we're feeling. I don't know about you, but I don't do the same thing to deal with my anger as I do my sadness. When I'm really, really angry at someone, I usually have to call someone and say, can you talk me through this? I need some help to think through this. When I'm sad, I tend to just kind of reflect or journal or retreat or maybe take a break, go for a walk, do some yoga. The P is a person, meaning some of us are introverted, some of us are extroverted. That's going to dictate what we might do. And then the C is the context. For example, right now, let's imagine that, Colum and Lisa are on my nerves and this webinar is not going well. I can't be like, you know what, guys, I'm going for a run. That's what I do to regulate. And they would start sweating and freaking out. Like, I don't understand, like, Mark, like, you can't go for a run right now. You got to finish the freaking webinar. Do you see what I'm saying? That the strategies that are available to us are contextual. That here and now, I probably have to do something in my head. Later on today, I could probably do something outside or call someone, journal. Can't start journaling right now about my feelings while I'm on the webinar if I'm getting anxious. Let me pause there. Any questions, comments? Does this feel like something that could guide you potentially over time? Not right now. It's overwhelming in the moment. But as a way of thinking about emotion regulation, think about it. There are kids in schools where not a lot of, and let's say they're like more movement oriented for their regulation, but the teacher's like, no, you must sit still with your hands crossed. They can't use a strategy in that context, even though that one might be best for them. All right, excellent. So the real definition in terms of language is the thoughts and actions we use to prime, prevent, reduce, initiate, maintain, enhance emotions to promote well-being and build relationships. Now, as I said in the beginning, there's self-regulation, there's co-regulation. The self is about Mark, take the high road. Mark, don't tell Colum how you really feel about him. That's self-regulation. And then there's co-regulation, which is I see Colum is feeling a little disappointed and I say, let's take a walk together. Let's talk through this. What can I do to support you? That's the social aspects of regulation. To get more technical for a minute, I think our dream and hope is for people to move from automatic, habitual, unhelpful ways of dealing to more deliberate, conscious ways. And so maybe these look familiar to some of you. Give me a thumbs up if you are someone who can sometimes be avoidant of your emotions or other people who are triggering your emotions. Anybody eat their feelings? All right. Any doom scrollers for dealing with their feelings? Anyone say, I'm just going to lose myself in movies for the next 2 weeks? Alcohol, rumination, suppression, procrastination. Notice that none of these unhelpful regulation strategies do you need a doctorate in psychology to learn. No, we learn them from somewhere. Parents, TV. One of my favorites is from a teacher who said, I just put my feelings in a box. Like, you go. I just want to hear it. We call that denial or suppression. It's pretty hard to just leave your feelings at the door. We also know in our research that the kids aren't regulating so well either. You can see the list here. So I'm going to jump to now, why don't we learn these strategies? Well, as I've shared, this is all in one of the chapters in the book. Like, we got to value this stuff. Schools got to value it. Homes have to value it. Our society has to value it. We got to think more prevention than intervention. Our governments need to value it. We need role models at the government level, at the management level in companies, at homes, schools, the community. And we're just not there yet. So this is where we're going to spend the rest of our time together. These are the buckets of strategies. So in the book that I wrote, every one of those bullet points is an actual full chapter. So those are 7 of the chapters. The first is about mindsets. So on a scale from 1 to 10, let me ask you this question. Everybody in the chat, on a scale from 1 to 10, how capable are you, or do you believe you are, in shifting and learning better emotion regulation strategies that become a permanent part of your identity. All right, we got 5 7s, we got a 4. Yeah. Now you're a little biased because I'm like standing in front of you. Maybe you would have had a different belief system earlier, but capacity equals 10, ability to do it all the time, tough. You're right. But we'll call that a growth mindset that, unlike my dad who would say things like, son, this is the way I deal with my anger. You're going to have to learn how to deal with it. He didn't say it quite like that, but that's what he was saying. What's the message there? Guess what? I'm not willing to learn anything. I don't want to change who I am. I'm not interested in getting better at this. If we don't have the mindset that we can learn it, we're probably not going to be motivated to learn it. Labeling emotions precisely. We got to build the vocabulary. What's the difference between anxiety and stress? Everyone, who can define anxiety versus stress? What is the difference? Anxiety is chronic, stress is acute. Perspective. Anxiety has fear mixed in. Anxiety is fear, stress is pressure. But pressure is its own word. Anxiety is about the future, internal versus external. So here's what we know. Anxiety is about uncertainty. So during the pandemic, the university shuts down. We're all spraying our groceries with Windex. I mean, what's going to happen? When is the world going to open up again? That's anxiety, the uncertainty, the inability to make predictions. Stress is when we have too many resources, not enough demand. Stress was when I got 500 emails in one day saying, we're freaking out. We need to help you. We need you to help us deal with our feelings. I had too many demands on my time and I couldn't figure out how to solve the problem. That's stress. Same or different in terms of how you would regulate? What do you think? Same strategy to deal with it or separate or maybe different? Different. So this is why we say you got to name it to tame it. You got to label it to regulate it. You have to know how to still your mind and body. That's that third bucket. People sometimes eye roll when we say we're going to do a breathing exercise, or when someone says, let's breathe together, take a deep breath, or let's do a little meditation or mindfulness exercise. But the research is pretty darn clear. A, our brains are all over the place and we're not focused and we have just really a hard time being still. So if we don't train our brain to be still, it's going to get less and less still over time, given the lives that we live. And you have to deactivate before you can regulate effectively. The fourth are thought strategies. I mean, in the book, I go through a lot of detail on this. It's quite elaborate what you can do in terms of the thought hacks in your brain. Things like, Mark, take the high road. Mark, one of my favorites, because I get overwhelmed easily. And then I start like panicking a little bit. Like, Mark, you know this feeling is impermanent. You've had this feeling of overwhelm for 55 years. And guess what? It is like a rainy day and a sunny day. It's raining right now and it's heavily raining. And you're feeling overwhelmed and a little bit freaked out. But you know that after you go to bed, tomorrow is going to be a sunny day, or maybe the day after. That's a time travel kind of thing. That's an important way of thinking about your feelings, recognizing that they are impermanent, which they are. That's the cognitive bucket. We got to develop the cognitive skills. The next bucket is the relationship skills. We got to have emotional allies. You know, we have to have people like Colum and Lisa that we can say, hey, you know what? I'm struggling with this. Can we talk through it? We're born to be social. And I have a phrase that is not mine, but I use a lot, which is never worry alone. We don't want to go into a downward spiral. We want to get the advice that we could, any advice that we can get is helpful. You got to have a good emotion regulation budget. Means you got to get enough sleep. You got to eat good foods or nutritious foods, like lots of carbs during the day to keep your energy up. And you need to move, all of which support regulation. And then finally, we can all strive to be the best versions of ourselves. So I'm ask you all to take a nice long inhale right now and a nice long exhale. And I want you to think about, of all these strategies that I just presented to you, which ones might be the ones that you should work on or could work on? Where would you like to put some attention over the next week or 2 or 3 in terms of, is it shifting your mindsets? Is it building your vocabulary? Is it calming your mind and body? Is it learning the cognitive strategies? Is it thinking about the relationship stuff? Is it your emotion regulation budget? Is it striving to be a better version of yourself in general? Please put that into the chat. Nice. So I'm going to wrap up now in about a minute, and then so Colum and I can have a nice combo. But what I'm going to wrap up with is giving you some tools and resources that are outside of the workshop that where you can go deeper. First is this app that I built that some of you may know about. It's called How We Feel. Just check it out. It's free on iOS and Android to build your vocabulary and learn strategies. The second is this web series that I built where I interview people like the singer Jewel, like the psychology expert Angela Duckworth, Dr. Alfie, who does work in Black mental health, people in bands like Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses, people who study things like awe, Dagmar Keltner, John Haidt from the Anxious Generation, Lisa Damore, who studies adolescent development, Dawn DaCosta, who is a superintendent here in New York City's public schools, people from all walks of life. So check that out. And then I think Felice or someone from the team put a link to my book in the chat. But if you want to go deeper with my book, what I'm doing is a free book club. Every time my book comes out, I do one, sometimes two of these kind of big book clubs where people can join for free. Just get a copy of the book and join. And it's 3 workshops over the course of 3 weeks. They're recorded, but it's really like people can ask lots of questions and dive deeply into the whole thing. And we can just help people really navigate and move forward in their lives. So let me stop there and Colum, it's over to you, buddy.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. So, question: how are you feeling?
How am I feeling?
Yeah.
Irritated that you asked me the question. No, I am feeling, you know, because my book just came out and I'm starting to pull together these presentations, my brain is in like, I'm like doing it and I'm also thinking, oh, I could do this and I could do this. So I'm feeling both content with what I think it was pretty good. Nice overview, but I'm also like, I want to go deeper and do different things.
Right. A lot of us are feeling anxious right now. I think as a result of what's going on in the world geopolitically and so on. So how do we calm ourselves down when it comes to some of the can we ask ourselves a question about how we're feeling in relation to the political context?
I mean, you don't have a choice because we're living in a world where the reality is what it is. And some of us may like that reality and some of us are really uncomfortable with it. And I think the most important thing is to like, I got quoted in this article, Mark sees himself as an emotion revolutionary. I was like, yikes. But I do, if I had my dreams come true, everybody in the world would have an emotion education. Every policymaker, every government leader would have a checklist that required them to consider how their policies would impact kids' healthy development. I mean, that would be my dream, to be honest. I recognize that's, as my father would say, a pipe dream. But I still have that hope, and I will do everything I can in my life and career to make that a reality. But I'm also aware that I have a lot of control over my own home, over my family, over my close friends. And I spend more time thinking about that. I can get lost in thinking about every kid in every classroom across the world. And I can really, I don't think that's productive. I think try to create little micro kind of experiences where, let's imagine here we have 100 people on the webinar. Let's imagine everyone here took one strategy away that was fresh and new to them to support their well-being and taught that to somebody else. And then those people taught it to somebody else. To me, that would be a real big one.
Sure. So we often ask each other, how are you feeling? We also ask each other, how did you feel?
Sure.
We seldom ask, how will you feel?
And I don't think you can ask that.
No.
But I think what you can ask is, how do you want to feel? Sorry. You could try.
No, but
no, but it's a really good question, which is, I actually really like that question a lot about how do you want to feel, because sometimes we're overwhelmed with dealing with the current feeling. And if we ask someone, well, how would you like to feel when you come into my office? How would you like to feel at home at dinner? How would you like to feel in that situation? We can strive towards achieving that. What would help you feel more appreciated? Well, I would feel more appreciated if people acknowledged me just once in a while in my office space to say thank you, as opposed to what will help you feel less, how do you deal with feeling disrespected? I think it's harder sometimes to go that way. It's easier sometimes to go for the hope for.
Nice. One of the things I learned from your book and just in just being in the general space where you were, and even the other day when I was listening to you talk, was that I even in the past couple of days I've asked myself the question: is this going to matter tomorrow?
Yeah, great strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I use that one a lot because I'm married and with my husband for 30 years, which is unbelievable because I think of myself as being 30. But anyhow, and we have very different personalities. So Horacio is an artist. I'm a director of a center. I have strategy and key performance indicators, and he has creativity, which I adore and love. But it's like, oh my gosh, sometimes the way we make choices and the way he does things drives me out of my mind. And then I have to say to myself, Mark, like sometimes I say to myself, like, you have seen this same thing happen for 29 years now. Are you gonna like not sleep over this, or are you gonna just let it go? How much of what he just did or said is gonna impact your relationship really? Really is not that big of a deal. So let it go. Is this gonna matter tomorrow? Is this gonna matter a week from now? Most of the things that drive us crazy are not existential things. They're little stupid things that oftentimes we allow them to metastasize. And I say, ask yourself, will this matter tomorrow? Will this matter in a week from now? Many times it won't.
You shared a very piercing story about the predator in your life. I'd like to ask a question about the time in your life when you felt most wound up. When you were at the was it at that particular time? Was it later? Was it in college? Was it last year? Was it the pandemic? When was the time that you felt that you personally were most constricted and you weren't actually harnessing some of the things that you're now talking about?
I could think of like moments in my life. I think in middle school where I was a failing student and I was being, I was being spit on the bus. I was being extorted. I was paying kids my money to leave me alone, which I didn't have any money, but I would steal money, to be honest, from my mother and father to pay these kids off. I was being written on in class where people would just write on me. I mean, it was really bad. And I was hopeless. And I just think, how is it possible that other kids thought that was okay? How is it possible? And I remember one of the moments that stands out to me is being in middle school and locking eyes with one of my teachers who saw me being bullied, and he looked the other way. I still remember that was 43 years ago.
So when he looked the other way,
it's like
that was his weakness.
Yeah, but I'm 13, I'm 12.
Right,
like
exactly.
I am not willing to accept anything other than safety for kids in school.
How do we equip teachers to not turn away when this stuff is happening, not only in the classroom, but also online today?
I think the mindset is that they have to be like therapists or clinical psychologists to do it. And that is not the case. That's why asking, for example, in our work in schools, we have what we call the emotional intelligence charter, which is asking people how they want to feel. And you need to say, how do we want to feel safe? We want to feel valued. We want to feel connected, or whatever the words are. What are we going to do to feel that way? And what are we going to do when people are behaving in ways that are misaligned with those hoped for feelings? And then, like any adult, we need to enforce it. We create those norms. I go back and I think a lot about this teacher. I think, was he just not smart? I don't know, maybe. I don't know, it's not even about smarts, I guess. Maybe he thought, oh, like this is the tough area of Jersey, it's like toughen up, kiddo, buttercup. That's not cool. That's like toxic masculinity on steroids. Maybe it was fear, like someone is saying here, Norma. Like maybe it was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. That's why I do believe we need to integrate emotional intelligence training into teacher preparation so that people have the words and how to create the environments for psychological and physical safety.
So who does that rely on? Does that rely on powers that supposedly be in some sort of anonymous education department? Does it rely on us as teachers? Does it rely on a sort of movement and education? And how do you change the mindsets, as Kathy asked here on the chat?
Well, I think two things. One is research. Hence, why I'm a professor of psychology and why we do studies on emotional intelligence and randomized controlled trials of our programs to show that schools that take this work seriously have teachers who are less burnt out, they're more engaged, they're better instructors, students with less stress and burnout, kids who get bullied less, school climate's more positive, academic outcomes go up. I don't know, that sounds pretty convincing to me.
Right.
And so I think we have to, A, teach people the science, and B, like they understand what an emotion is and why it matters and how it impacts kids' self-esteem and learning and development. And then B, we have to these great approaches like narrative 4 and my work on ruler and show through implementation, through feedback from teachers and students and research that this is shifting lives in really positive ways.
Can I ask you then, what attracted you to narrative 4 in the process that we do here? Because we're lucky to get you on our board.
I like creative people. I like approaches to youth development that are creative. And I feel that narrative 4 has huge potential to help people understand other people's perspectives. And I think that we live in a society where people are very myopic. It's all about me, 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 me. And one of my biggest hopes is that we can create a society that has an other orientation. And what's beautiful about having other orientation is that what the research shows is that when we can help other people be the best versions of themselves, that when we observe that, it impacts us. We feel great when we help other people. And then I think what's even more important than that is that when other people observe us helping other people be the best version of themselves, it's contagious. And I see that the work that Narrative 4 is doing in terms of helping people develop compassion and perspective-taking skills, my hope is that it's contagious.
Thank you. I have a friend who once wrote, he said, sentiment without action is the ruin of the soul. I don't quite agree with that because I think sometimes sentiment on its own is going to be powerful enough, because even to have that sentiment, which is a form of feeling, of course, is absolutely necessary. But what he was calling for was a form of action that went beyond the recognition or even the establishment of the sentiment. Action, action, action. Where do we begin to, I don't know, foster the grassroots for action?
I think the mindset is be the first. Like so many people are like, well, I'm going to watch and wait to see if this works. I'm going to see this. I'm going to, be hesitant. I'm going to be the external observer. I'm not going to get on the bus. I'm going to watch the bus, and then I'll sit in the back of the bus or the middle of the bus, but I'm not going to drive the bus. And I think that we just need people take a risk and practice a strategy that you might not have used before to help you deal with your feelings. When you notice, it's funny, going back to my husband for a minute, I'm very analytical because I'm a scientist. I think about why I think, and I think about why I think about why I think. And he's more like experiential learning. He's like, I'm in it. So we'll be at a restaurant and there'll be a parent with kids, and the kid is like rocking the chair. And I'm thinking like, these parents are terrible. They don't pay attention to their kid. And like, I'm analyzing the parents and he's already caught the kid who's falling. And I'm envious of that automatic way of being helpful and supportive. And I think that we can all kind of jump in more as opposed to just waiting for what might happen.
Excellent. And I'm going to encourage people to come onto the chat, and I'll try to get to your questions. And I see Leslie here is asking, my question, she says, is how to deal with parents and caregivers who don't buy into the importance of emotional intelligence. Leslie is an elementary school teacher who teaches SEL.
Great. It goes back to the same thing. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of it. Like parents, for example, oftentimes think you're prying into my child's personal life. And I would just say, I'm prying into your kid's life in my classroom when they're feeling anxious about the test. And I'm just trying to help them learn a strategy to manage anxiety to get that grade that you hope they get. You know, when your child is not getting chosen to be on a team and they're feeling left out and lonely, I'm trying to create the conditions for your kid to not feel bad about themselves, but also make sure that they're in a safe and supportive classroom and school environment. I think always going back to what parents want for their kids, and making it and giving real clear examples. So they're not thinking, oh, you're like, there's somebody who said to me recently, you know, your program is asking kids why they're depressed all the time and what happened in their homes over the weekend. Like, we don't do that. Like, I don't want anybody to do that. We didn't write that in our program guide. And so just clarifying, you know, what it is so people can see that it's actually really helpful for their kid. If you ask any parent what they want for their kid in school, what they say is I want my kid to be happy. I want my kid to make friends, and I want my kid to be able to do well in school. And so we're helping kids learn the skills and strategies to help them achieve those outcomes.
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing, this is great. I think the other thing is that I think that sometimes parents think like, okay, you fix my kid, and they don't understand that the way they're responding, their lack of emotional regulation is really a big part of the problem. And so I don't know, I guess it's I really love what you suggested, and but I'm also wondering how to say, like, maybe the whole family could use.
Have you thought about taking a deep breath, mommy? Yes, I agree with you. And in our model ruler, we have a family assignment for every piece of ruler. So kids go home and teach their parents strategies.
I love that.
I just learned this new strategy, which is called reframing. It's how to shift the way I think about things. Mommy, I want to teach you that strategy. When have you reframed? Mommy, I just learned this new word called elated or alienated. And it means this. I felt this way. Can you tell a time when you felt that way?
Yes.
So kind of involving parents is a way to get them to co-cultivate the skills.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, you know, Mark, that, you know, we both travel quite a lot. And I mentioned this to you the other day, that when you go to an airport and they come across on the announcement, those in active military service and active military duty, you know, please come on board and your first class passengers, because you are at the, you know, you're at the forefront. You are there on the line. And I'm sort of the opinion that, and I think that's great. It's fine. I have no qualms about that whatsoever. But I'm waiting for the day when we can begin to treat teachers in the same sort of way. When you walk up to the front of the queue and you say, I'm a teacher, and here's my teaching card and my union card, and how do we start to cultivate a new attitude towards teachers with better pay, better pensions, better involvement, and also leading to a question that's asked by Laura, that teachers themselves are being victimized in several ways, you know, in the current social climate. How do individual teachers maintain their own safety in order to protect and stand up for their students against administrations, against parents, against people who want banned books, and so on? I think it's an important way. The whole atmosphere around teachers and teaching somehow needs to be changed, and we need to acknowledge in a powerful way the importance of these people who are on the front line.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other webinar. So that's a lot that you just asked. You're like, give me 10 seconds. And that's a lot to think about. But what I would say is that an unwell teacher is going to not be a great instructor. An unwell teacher, burnt out teacher, is not what we want. No one wants a teacher who's burnt out in front of the classroom, because emotions are contagious. So that apathy, that sadness, that overwhelm, that fear will translate. And so if we care about kids, then we have to care about the systems that are surrounding kids, which means that we need to make sure that we provide training and supports for the educators, for school leaders, for district level people, hopefully at the county level, and for example, in Connecticut, just to give you one last example of what I'm doing. So it's taken me years, but it's happening. I have the superintendents union. It's called CAPS, the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. I have both teachers unions. I have the principals unions, the State School Board Association, all working together to create what I call an emotionally intelligent state. And so every one of them now is seeing their role, the superintendent's role, the principal's role, the counselor's role, the teacher's role, and the student's role, and the parent's role. And if we can, in the school boards, for the parent, if we can get all these constituents to understand together the value and importance of this work, I think we can create lasting change.
Sort of a side spin-off of that, Shoshana asks, have there been social anthropological studies that reveal how skillful different cultures are at developing emotional intelligence? So is there a different form of emotional intelligence? Like Ruler is in 5,000 schools,
33 countries
all over the world, 33 countries. And have you noticed that, is there sort of global engagement that we can do with this, or is it site specific?
There is a lot of global engagement. It's super exciting because I have visitors coming from Hong Kong next week, where we're thinking about 1,000 schools in Hong Kong that are going to get trained in Ruler. And are there cultural adaptations? Yes, there are, but they're not as grand as people might think. Humans are humans. So for example, those characteristics of the Uncle Marvins, the non-judgment, the good listening, and the empathy, I have replicated that now in 7 countries. There are no cultural differences, whether you're Chinese, Australian, Italian, or from Spain or Costa Rica. When you think about the people who create the best conditions for you, they're non-judgmental, good listeners who show empathy and compassion. So we get hung up, I think, on culture, and I know that some people will be triggered by me saying that. And there are cultural differences. We're not ignoring them. We're going in as compassionate scientists exploring culture, but there is something that is true to having a common humanity as well.
And Katerina asks, if you have a parent and the personality structure of the parent, to prevent insight into their own actions and their own personality traits such as narcissism, how do you support the children of those parents who actively undermine, ridicule, and even punish their child's attempt to learn skills to self-regulate?
God, you're putting me through the ringer here.
You gotcha, baby.
Reality is reality. I'll give you an example. I had a nephew who, he's a godson of my husband, who was in a very difficult situation with his mom, and I'm not going to change the mom's behavior. But the beautiful thing about schools is that we've got 6 to 8 hours a day to create the best possible learning environments for these kids. And so if you can't have all 24 hours being the best possible 24 hours, let's make the freaking best for these kids for the 6 to 8 hours that they're in our environment.
Different question. What are your thoughts on Gen AI trends? And the question goes, what are your thoughts on them leading to companionship and emotion? What do you propose to help marry AI tools with informed curriculum design?
Yeah, I am against it. I think that AI can be useful as a learning tool. I think if you want to give me some ideas for how I can talk to my partner, when I'm feeling irritable, great. Use AI to think about the possibilities. But the only way to develop the muscle that we need to navigate our social and emotional lives is by being in the real world with real people and practicing these skills and seeing if they work or not, and then for apologizing and forgiving and trying to move forward and backwards and 2 steps forward, 3 steps backward, whatever the heck it is. This is not a cold cognitive aspect of our life. It's not about learning. You could probably learn math using AI well, because it's kind of you're learning formulas and numeracy. And it's not, 2 + 2 will equal 4 if you're sad, if you're happy, if you're angry, or if you're overwhelmed. But what I say and what I do when I'm activated is very different than what I say and what I do when I'm cold, or not cold, like freezing, but meaning when I'm not activated. So people say things like, I'm the most emotionally intelligent person I know. And then you spit in their face, or you throw sand in their face, or you say like, good for you. You make fun of them and you make them feel really bad. And boom, all that beautiful knowledge they had is gone because they can't access it. And so the only way we're going to get that muscle built is by being with real people in the real world.
Super. Libby in South Africa, she has had teachers who've joined her social emotional learning program, but she has found out that the hyper rational principals are not interested in taking the SEL on board. What do you do to motivate the school principals to start integrating the administrators?
I think you have to teach people the science. It goes back to the science. They don't really understand the role of emotions in learning, tension, etc. Once you understand the science that how people feel drives where they spend or where they put their attention, it's like, ooh, that's powerful. Once you realize that emotions, when they're strong and lasting for too long, get in the way and interfere with learning, and that there's actual strategies to help people manage those emotions effectively that will help them be better learners and decision makers and friends, then you kind of get more motivated to want to do it. Libby, did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry.
Please.
No, I said that. So my goal is reframing education in South Africa with SEL. And I've been at it for a few more years than you, 7, 8 years, 30 years of teaching now, 7, 8 years as an SEL specialist.
Cool.
And whoa, it's hard. Get the teachers on board, but I like what you said about the kid that has the troubled home and focus on the 6 hours that you have them. So I must get those teachers that are keen on SEL. They've got to change it from within.
I mean, if you're a doctor, or a nurse or a teacher, right, you have to realize how much control you have and don't have over people's lives. And I think overzealous empathy is going to lead to compassion fatigue, and you're going to be miserable because you don't have the power to change everything about everyone's life. But think about what you can do, in the moments you are with that child. Those are lasting moments that can impact their lives in very healthy and positive ways.
Thank you, Mark. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. At Narrative 4, as you know, we're also looking at integrating colleges. One of the things that is really fascinating to me personally is that, how can we get into colleges and maybe even use that first year experience?
I think it's great.
And then you build up a population for over the course of 4 years to do so. But Leah Flack, who's
and then there's a woman, I think Kristen Robinson has
okay, great.
Her hand up.
We'll get to her right next. Leah asks, what would you say to college faculty to persuade them, these people who feel like floating heads who are valued mainly for their intellectual production? Where could they begin to confront these matters for their own teacher effectiveness?
Again, I think it goes back to in that context, like there's a big difference as a professor myself teaching, a course that meets 2 or 3 times a week for an hour versus being someone who is in a self-contained classroom, throughout the day with kids. And so, for example, I teach a course called Emotional Intelligence. And I have to think about my goal. What do I want my students to get out of my class? Do I want them to memorize the correlation coefficient, in my studies? I don't remember those things myself. I don't really care. That's not the goal of my class. The goal of my class is to get my students to be motivated to live emotionally intelligent lives. And so I have to think about what is the way that I present that material to make them to help them feel motivated, inspired, engaged, so that they take the content, and how do I even deliver the content in an emotionally intelligent way using what I would call emotionally intelligent pedagogy? because emotions are driving the learning process. So if I can figure out how to bring kids in to the learning process by doing certain activities that last this amount of time, that create this feeling, I know it's going to impact their learning, and I know it's going to impact their, when, for example, if I do reflections with them to get them to think about the relevance and meaningfulness of the work, all those teaching techniques, in my opinion, are emotionally intelligent or not.
Perfect. Kristen Robinson, we're going to open up for your question. Can we unmute Kristen there?
Yes. Okay. So this is kind of like, I guess, maybe a twofold question. I am a former Board of Education school teacher. I've since
Great.
become a faith-based community bridge worker. And I know how wonderful this would have been when I taught back in the 90s. So now here we are, fast forward. And as many educators, facilitators, administrators that are here, I'm wondering, in obtaining this information to better help your students or your audience, what time will be taken, or what you would recommend the time taken and the initiative to apply this to self so that you would be better effective when facilitating and administering and educating?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm just going to say bluntly that this is life's work. Every day I teach this stuff, I learn something new. Every time someone asks me a difficult question, I get stumped. I think, oh gosh, how am I going to show up as my best self? Do I show my humility, or do I flub it? Do I make it? I just think that I have this weird gift that I wake up every morning and I say to myself, today, Mark, is the first day of the rest of your life. And I'm lucky that I just feel that way. And it's like, I'm a learner every single day. And I do know a lot, and I'm blessed that I have got degrees, and I read a lot, and I've written a book, but I'm still in learning mode. And I just think if we can adopt that mindset, we're going to be a lot healthier and happier. And the little steps are good. Just build your vocabulary. Just start with building your vocabulary. Start by reading a book. Start by practicing one strategy this week and see what you've learned from it. And I think that's the way forward. We're never going to be prepared for everything. My mom died when I was 24, pancreatic cancer. I could not have predicted that for anything. I thought my mother would be alive today. She died 30 years ago now. And so when I didn't get into the Ph.D. program that I wanted to get into, I thought, gosh, I thought my life was over. And my life is better than it was back then. And so again, just having that growth mindset, learning and learning and learning, and just applying it to your life and refining it is what I recommend.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you very much.
There are a couple of questions on here about how might this apply in a sort of increasingly violent world, or what seems to be an increasingly violent world? And sometimes it just feels to many of us that we're trying to drain the ocean with a teaspoon, and just bit by bit. Is it enough, or are there new strategies that we can do that are grassroots strategies that can really change this? And say, is narrative 4 maybe part? I would think that narrative 4 is part of that overall global strategy, where we could think about beginning to change things on a grassroots level, with the hope that it opens all these other gates.
It's interesting. On my podcast, which I'll now invite you on just because I think it'd be fun. Of course, I'm thinking of Duff McKagan, who is a very famous guy from Guns N' Roses. And I ask everyone to imagine a world where everyone gets an emotion education. What would be different? I'm a little grandiose in my life. And he's like, dude, I can't think that much. That's way too much. That's too hard. But I'm thinking about my family. I'm thinking about the block I live on. I'm thinking about my relatives, and I'm just going to start there. And so I think that we can get lost in trying to change the world, and that we can do really good work in helping these micro communities remain safe, build strategies, feel supported, and then that grows and grows and grows and grows. So I say, think global but act local, as they say.
I like that, and also that tiny can eventually become epic. I think I learned this as a writer, that sometimes the devil or God is in the details, so that the smallest little glance and the tender little things that we can do to one another, the tender mercies that happen even out on a street, holding the door for somebody, or caring for somebody, and carrying their shopping, and all these things that seem a little bit corny sometimes, actually are among the building blocks that help us, because we do seem so isolated and diseased with certainty. And everyone's so certain about how they feel. How do we inhabit the floodplain between those different canals of certainty? Because there is a floodplain there, and most of the people who want to get on the floodplain get washed away because everybody wants you to go into one canal or the other canal. And I think that what we're talking about here is a sort of emotional messiness, or at least an embrace of contradiction and difficulty, which is kind of what our community is so much about. And I hope that we can learn to spread it. I think you do this in spectacular ways. I have one final question for you, and then this is the most difficult question of all.
Okay.
One of my favorite writers, Michael Ondaatje, when I was interviewing him, I also asked Michael or Salman Rushdie the same question. And it tends to disrupt.
I'm feeling
ready?
Very high self-esteem now. You're putting me in that category. But I put myself in that category.
It's a three-word question.
Go for it.
Are you happy?
It's funny because at the event that you were at with me the other day, I shared that I was happy, and my family at dinner that night, they're like, "What? You're finally happy?" And it was really funny because happiness to me is a complicated phenomenon. I think as a scientist of emotion, I think happy is oftentimes like, oh, when I get the fancy car, when I get the new apartment, when, this book comes out, I'll finally be happy. And so I don't strive to be happy. What I strive for is more a sense of contentment in my life. And so I am feeling personally more contented than I've ever felt. Professionally, I'm never going to be happy because I have no patience and I want to see radical change happen. And so I'm always going to be kind of a little bit pissed, a little bit angry, a little bit annoyed and frustrated, because I think that lots of what's happening in our society is unfair in terms of I see a lot of injustices, and I don't see anger as being a bad emotion. I see a lot of positives for anger because it keeps you motivated to, put up the good fight.
Well, thank you so much. And Anna
Thank
says,
you.
Thank you for an inspiring conversation, and that contentment is everything.
Thank you, everybody. Let me just say to Narrative 4 before you do my promotion form. It's always better for someone else to be promoting your work. Just thank you this is a long webinar. And like you're hearing some guy from Connecticut talk about it, feelings for an hour and a half. God bless you for doing that. So thank you for showing up today. Thank you, Narrative 4, for doing this event for my book and for our, collaboration, and just feeling, dare I say, happy.
Today is Rosh Hashanah, as we know, and as Mark told us earlier. Thank you for everybody for coming on to celebrate with us. Happy New Year to those who are celebrating. And we're just really grateful that you all came along. Let's continue these conversations. We're actually here together. We're going to slide together. See?
Right.
And we're all going to be reading this.
Emotional Revolutionaries.
Emotional Revolutionaries. Listen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. See you soon.
Be well, everyone.
Bye-bye.